I could not wait for my son Nathan's wedding day. After raising him alone since he was 3, watching him graduate college and find love felt like the ultimate payoff for all those years of sacrifice. As a construction worker, I never had much, but I gave Nathan everything I could. Walking into that fancy country club in my new suit, I felt proud but nervous. These were wealthy people, and Madison's family had always looked down on me. What I never expected was to find my seat at the reception, only to discover my nameplate reading "low-educated fake dad." Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button. You will not believe what my son did when he saw what they had written about me. 20 years ago, my life changed forever, when my wife Stacy packed her bags and left us. Nathan was only 3 years old, and I was 22, working entry-level construction jobs with barely enough money to make rent. She had met some hotshot real estate developer who promised her the world. Her parting words still echo in my mind. "Sometimes, Booker, you will never amount to anything. I deserve better than this life." Those first few years were the hardest. I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning to get Nathan ready for daycare, drop him off with my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, then worked 10 to 12-hour shifts. After picking him up, I would cook whatever simple meal I could manage, read him a story, and collapse from exhaustion, only to do it all again the next day. There were nights I would sit at our small kitchen table after Nathan was asleep, bills spread out before me, wondering how we would make it through another month. What kept me going was Nathan's smile, his unwavering trust in me, and my determination to prove that a father with calloused hands could raise a good man. I missed parent-teacher conferences because of work, showed up to school events in dusty work boots, and lived in constant fear of not being enough. But we managed. We more than managed. We thrived in our own way. Weekends became our sacred time. Every Sunday, rain or shine, we would go fishing at the small lake just outside town. Nathan learned to cast a line before he could tie his shoes properly. During summer breaks, I would take him to construction sites and teach him how to use tools safely. By age 10, he had helped me build a tree house in our backyard that was the envy of every kid in the neighborhood. These moments, these simple joys, formed the foundation of our bond, a bond built on presence, not presence. My hands might have been rough from manual labor, but they were gentle enough to bandage scraped knees, strong enough to carry him to bed when he fell asleep on the couch, and steady enough to guide him through life's challenges. We were not rich in money, but we were wealthy in ways that mattered more. As Nathan grew older, his natural intelligence and curiosity blossomed. His third-grade teacher, Mrs. Fernandez, was the first to notice his exceptional math abilities. "Booker," she told me during one rare parent-teacher meeting, "I managed to attend your son, has a remarkable mind. He needs to be challenged more." Those words lit a fire in me. If Nathan had potential beyond what I could ever achieve, I would move heaven and earth to help him realize it. We started visiting the public library every Tuesday evening. While Nathan devoured books on mathematics, science, and history, I would sit nearby thumbing through home improvement magazines, or sometimes, when no one was watching too closely, remedial math workbooks. I had dropped out of high school to work, but I was determined to learn enough to help with his homework. By the time Nathan reached high school, he was taking advanced placement courses and dreaming of college, something no one in our family had ever done. I picked up every overtime shift available, moonlighted as a handyman on weekends, and squirreled away every extra dollar for his education fund. When college application season arrived during his senior year, I took 3 days off work unpaid to drive him to campus tours within a 5-hour radius of our home. The proudest day of my life, before the wedding at least, was when Nathan received his acceptance letter to Westridge University with a substantial scholarship. I remember him bursting through the door, letter clutched in his hand, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, Dad," I got in. We danced around our tiny living room like fools, laughing and crying. That night I splurged on steaks from the good butcher across town, and we celebrated like kings. College meant Nathan moving 3 hours away. Our small 2-bedroom house felt cavernous without him. We called each other every Sunday night without fail, and I drove up once a month with care packages full of his favorite snacks and home-cooked meals for his freezer. His stories fascinated me. Classes with renowned professors, research projects, study groups that lasted until dawn. Though I understood barely half of what he described about his computer science major, I listened with rapt attention, swelling with pride at the man he was becoming. It was during his junior year that he first mentioned Madison. "Dad, I met this girl in my data structures class. She is really something else." As the weeks passed, Madison featured more prominently in our calls. By Christmas break, I could tell from the way he talked about her that this was serious. When he brought her home to meet me that spring, I understood why. Madison was not just beautiful with her auburn hair and warm smile, but whip-smart and genuinely kind. She looked me in the eye when speaking, asked thoughtful questions about my work, and most importantly, looked at Nathan with obvious adoration. Over a simple dinner of my signature lasagna, she thanked me for raising such an exceptional man. I liked her immediately. Meeting her parents was a different story altogether. The following month, Nathan and Madison invited me to dinner at her family home in Oak Ridge Heights, the affluent side of town, where I usually only went for construction jobs. Walter and Eleanor Harrington lived in a sprawling colonial-style house with a circular driveway and manicured gardens. Walter, I learned, was the CEO of a regional banking chain, while Eleanor came from old money and sat on the boards of several charitable foundations. From the moment I stepped into their marble-floored foyer, I felt like an intruder. Walter gave me a once over his handshake, just a beat too firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "So you are in construction," he said, not asked. "Fascinating. We just had our guest house renovated. Cost an absolute fortune, but I suppose skilled labor does not come cheap these days." The emphasis on skilled made it clear what category he believed I fell into. Eleanor was more subtle in her condescension. She spoke slowly to me as if concerned I might not follow standard English, and kept steering the conversation toward topics that highlighted my lack of education, art collections, European vacation homes, wine vintages. When I mentioned our fishing trips, she wrinkled her nose slightly and quickly changed the subject. Throughout the uncomfortable evening, I caught Nathan tensing up, ready to defend me, but I gave him small headshakes to stand down. This was not a battle worth fighting, not yet anyway. What mattered was that he and Madison were happy. If enduring an evening of subtle jabs was the price for my son's happiness, I would gladly pay it. As dinner concluded, Walter poured expensive scotch for the men and raised a toast. "To new connections," he said smoothly. Though I must admit I always imagined Madison with someone from a family more like ours. He laughed as if he had made a harmless joke, but the message was crystal clear. In their eyes, Nathan, my brilliant, kind, hard-working son, was not quite good enough because of where he came from, because of me. The drive home was quiet. Finally, Nathan broke the silence. "I am sorry about them, Dad. They can be elitist jerks sometimes, but Madison is nothing like them." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "All that matters is how she treats you," I told him. "And from what I can see, she treats you pretty damn well." Little did I know that evening was just a preview of the tensions to come. 6 months later, Nathan called with exciting news. He and Madison were engaged. After graduation, they had both landed excellent jobs at the same tech company, and Nathan had proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains. My heart swelled with joy, though it was tinged with anxiety about what planning a wedding with the Harringtons might entail. My fears were well-founded. Within weeks, the interference began. When I offered my life savings, $30,000, I had set aside over years of careful budgeting to help with wedding expenses. Walter waved it away. "That is quite unnecessary," he said dismissively. "We will handle everything. It should be at a venue befitting the Harrington name." What followed was a systematic exclusion from nearly every aspect of the wedding planning. Invitations went out to their country club friends and business associates, 400 guests, most of whom neither Nathan nor Madison particularly cared about. The few people I had hoped to invite, my foreman Mike, who had been flexible with my schedule all those years. My neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who had helped raise Nathan, a couple of friends who had supported us through tough times, were deemed non-essential by Eleanor, in the interest of keeping numbers manageable. Nathan fought some battles but conceded others for Madison's sake. I encouraged him to pick his fights carefully. This is one day I told him. Your marriage is what matters, not the wedding. Still, each time I received a perfunctory update call from Eleanor about decisions already made or was accidentally left off. Email chains about planning meetings. The message was clear. I was an afterthought, a necessary but unwelcome addition to their perfect event. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a call from Walter. About your toast, he began without preamble. Eleanor and I think it would be best if you kept it brief. Perhaps 2 minutes maximum. And if you could run the text by us beforehand, we want to ensure it matches the sophisticated tone of the evening. The implication that I might embarrass everyone with my unrefined speech hung heavy in the air. I swallowed my pride and agreed, though I had already written and rewritten my speech dozens of times, determined to find the perfect words to honor my son on his special day. That night I practiced in front of the bathroom mirror, until my voice grew hoarse, determined not to give them any ammunition against me. The weekend of the wedding arrived with perfect May weather. The venue was Westbrook Manor, a historic estate with sprawling gardens, and a ballroom that could have fit my entire house inside it several times over. Pulling up in my 10-year-old sedan wearing the new suit, I had splurged on the first suit I had purchased since my own wedding. 2 decades earlier, I felt painfully out of place among the luxury vehicles and designer clothes. Nathan spotted me as soon as I entered, and broke away from a conversation to embrace me tightly. "You made it, Dad," he whispered, as if there had been any doubt I would move mountains to be there. For a moment, with my son's arms around me, everything felt right. Then Eleanor appeared, giving me a cool air kiss near my cheek. "Booker, so glad you could join us. The staff can show you where to put your things." Staff, not family. Staff. The rehearsal dinner that evening was an exercise in subtle humiliation. I was seated at the far end of a long table, separated from Nathan by at least a dozen people. Walter introduced me to his golfing buddies as Nathan's father. He works in construction with the same tone. One might say he juggles flaming batons in the circus. When I used the wrong fork for my salad, Eleanor reached across the table to swap it for the correct utensil, drawing every eye at the table. "Really," Eleanor laughed, one of her friends, "you cannot expect everyone to know proper table etiquette. Some people never had the opportunity to learn." Her sympathy was perhaps more cutting than open mockery would have been. Later, as I reached for my water glass, a waiter carrying a tray of red wine stumbled, sending a cascade of Cabernet down the front of my new suit, the only nice suit I owned. As I dabbed ineffectually at the spreading stain, I heard Madison's cousin Stage whisper to her date that suit was off the rack anyway. Through it all, Nathan was pulled in too many directions to notice what was happening. This was his moment, his celebration, and despite my discomfort, I was determined not to cast a shadow on his joy. I smiled through clenched teeth, laughed at inside jokes. I did not understand and reminded myself repeatedly that this weekend was not about me. The next morning, I helped Nathan get ready in a suite at the venue. As he struggled with his bow tie, I stepped in to help, remembering how I had taught him to tie his shoelaces years ago with the same patient hands. "Nervous?" I asked. "A little," he admitted. "Not about marrying Madison. That is the easiest decision I have ever made. Just all this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings. I straightened his tie and rested my hands on his shoulders. "I am so proud of you, son. Not because of this fancy wedding or your impressive job or the fact that you are marrying into a wealthy family. I am proud because you have become a man of character. You work hard, you treat people with respect, and you have found someone who loves you for who you are." My voice caught slightly. "Your mother missing out on the man you have become is her greatest loss." Nathan's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Everything good in me came from you, Dad." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I was going to give you this during the reception, but now seems right." Inside was a sleek new watch. Engraved on the back were the words, "To my father, my hero, my foundation. Love, Nathan." I slipped it onto my wrist, too choked up to speak. We embraced again, and for a moment the Harringtons and their world of privilege faded away. This connection, this unbreakable bond between father and son, was something their money could never buy. Our moment was interrupted by a sharp knock. Madison's mother entered without waiting for a response. "Nathan, dear, the photographer wants some pictures of you with Madison's father before the ceremony. And Booker Madison asked if you could please keep your reception toast under 1 minute. The schedule is quite tight." With that, she whisked Nathan away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and new watch. The ceremony itself was beautiful, if overly elaborate. I sat alone in the front row, designated for parents of the groom, a row that would have held more family members if circumstances were different. Across the aisle, the bride's side overflowed with relatives, friends, and business associates. As Nathan recited his vows, his voice strong and sure, I blinked back tears of mingled joy and pride. After the ceremony, guests moved to the grand ballroom for the reception. Tables draped in silk and adorned with towering floral arrangements filled the space. A string quartet played softly, as attendants directed everyone to their assigned seats. I made my way toward the front of the room where I assumed the family table would be. I scanned the place cards looking for my name among the Harringtons and bridal party. Table after table yielded nothing. Finally, at a table near the kitchen doors, far from Nathan and Madison, I found my place setting. The shock of what I saw there froze me in place. The elegant calligraphy nameplate read, "Low-educated fake dad." I blinked hard, certain I had misread. But the words remained stark against the cream-colored cardstock. My breath caught in my throat as I heard snickering behind me. Turning slightly, I saw Madison's brother Tyler and several of his friends poorly concealing their laughter. "Classic," one of them whispered. "Whose idea was that anyway?" "Walter had it made special," Tyler replied. "Said it was time someone put the fraud in his place." I felt a presence beside me and turned to see Eleanor. For a moment something like shame flickered across her face as she spotted the nameplate. Then her features hardened and she smoothly walked past, pretending she had seen nothing. Walter appeared moments later, glancing at the nameplate with feigned surprise. "Oh dear," he said with exaggerated concern that did not match the gleam in his eyes. "Seems there was a printing error. How embarrassing for the stationer. I will have it corrected immediately." He plucked the nameplate from the table, but the damage was already done. In that moment I understood completely. This was not a mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated attempt to humiliate me on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life. The message was clear. No matter what I had done for Nathan, no matter how hard I had worked or sacrificed to them, I would always be nothing but a low-educated fake dad. I stumbled away from the table, mumbling something about needing air. My face burned with humiliation as I pushed through the kitchen doors and out into the service corridor. Finding a quiet alcove near the loading dock, I leaned against the wall and tried to steady my breathing. 20 years of sacrifice, of working my fingers to the bone of going without, so Nathan could have opportunities reduced to a cruel joke on a nameplate. The watch on my wrist suddenly felt heavy. Was I fooling myself? Had I ever been good enough? Memories flooded back, teaching Nathan to ride a bike in the empty parking lot behind our apartment building. Staying up all night with him when he had pneumonia at age 8, because we could not afford a hospital stay. Working double shifts to buy him a computer for his programming courses. The look of pride on his face when he introduced me to his college friends. Were these the actions of a fake dad? The service door creaked open, and a middle-aged Latino man in maintenance coveralls stepped out, a cigarette in hand. He paused when he saw me. "Sorry, man. Did not mean to intrude on your space." I waved dismissively. "You are not intruding. Just needed a minute away from everything." He nodded knowingly as he lit his cigarette. "Big fancy wedding, huh? I have worked here 15 years, seen hundreds of them." He studied my suit. "You are not staff." "Family father of the groom," I said, the words catching slightly. "Ah," he said, understanding dawning on his weathered face. "Let me guess. Bride's family has money. Looks down on you." I gave a hollow laugh. "That obvious, I have seen it before." He extended his hand. "Carlos. Booker. I replied, shaking his hand. You know what I learned watching all these rich folks? Booker money buys a lot, but not character. Not real love. He took a long drag of his cigarette. My daughter married a doctor 5 years ago. His family treated me like I was invisible at the wedding. Now, they call me every time something breaks in their fancy house. He chuckled. And my daughter, she still comes to her papa first when she needs real advice. His simple wisdom settled something in me. This was not about my worth. It was about their insecurity. Nathan knew who I was, what I had given him. Walking away now would only validate their belief that I did not belong. Thanks, Carlos, I said, straightening my suit jacket. I should get back in there. Carlos nodded approvingly. Show them what real class looks like, amigo. When I returned to the ballroom, I found my nameplate had indeed been replaced with a correct one, but my seat had been moved to a table in the far corner populated by distant acquaintances and elderly relatives. No one seemed to want to talk. 2. I took my seat with as much dignity as I could muster. The reception progressed with excruciating slowness. Walter gave a toast that managed to mention Nathan's humble beginnings and how fortunate he was to be joining such a distinguished family who could guide his future prospects. When it came time to acknowledge family members, Eleanor introduced her extensive network of relatives down to second cousins, but merely gestured vaguely in my direction, with a quick case. And of course, we welcomed Nathan's father, as well. Throughout the evening, several of Madison's relatives mistook me for hotel staff, with one aunt actually handing me her empty champagne glass and asking for a refill. When the DJ announced the father-daughter dance, Walter proudly led Madison onto the floor for a perfectly choreographed waltz. The father-son dance I had requested, and supposedly been granted, never materialized, lost in what the coordinator later called a scheduling oversight. As the night wore on, I maintained my composure through sheer force of will. For Nathan's sake, I smiled, made small talk with whoever wandered near my isolated table, and tried to focus on the fact that my son was happy with the woman he loved. That was what mattered, I told myself repeatedly. Not my wounded pride. But then came the moment that shattered my carefully maintained facade. During a lull in the music, Walter clinked his glass to make yet another impromptu speech. Slightly drunk now, his words were less guarded than before. I just want to say how proud we are to welcome Nathan into our family. He began, arms slung around my son's shoulders. Despite his unconventional upbringing, he has turned out remarkably well. Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the crowd. Just goes to show that some people can overcome any obstacle, even being raised by a single father with no education to speak of. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Nathan's expression shifted from discomfort to confusion to dawning realization. I saw him scanning the room until his eyes found mine, questions forming on his face. Walter, oblivious to the shifting mood, continued, Madison has always had the best of everything. Now, thanks to us, Nathan will too. Probably the first time in his life. Right? He laughed at his own joke, but few joined him. Maybe now you can finally buy your father some proper etiquette lessons. Stop. Nathan's voice cut through the awkward silence. What are you talking about? Walter blinked, surprised at the interruption. Just a bit of harmless fun, son. Nathan stepped away from him, his posture stiffening. Where is my father sitting? Why is he not at the family table? His eyes darted around the room, noting the distance between my table and his. An uncomfortable silence fell. Madison touched Nathan's arm, whispering something, but he gently removed her hand and walked directly to me. Dad, what is going on? He asked quietly. I did not want to ruin his day, but the concern in his eyes made it impossible to maintain the charade. Wordlessly, I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo I had taken of the original nameplate. His face drained of color. Who did this? It was just a little joke, called Tyler from nearby. Lighten up. A joke. Nathan's voice was dangerously quiet. You think publicly humiliating my father is funny? Walter stepped forward, his patronizing smile firmly in place. Now, Nathan, I am sure Booker understands a bit of sophisticated humor. No need to make a scene. Sophisticated Nathan's voice rose. You call this sophisticated? My father worked 60-hour weeks for 20 years, so I could have opportunities he never had. He taught me everything that matters: integrity, hard work, treating people with respect, regardless of their background. And this is how you welcome him. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Madison had moved to Nathan's side, now her expression horrified as she pieced together what had happened. Walter's face hardened. You are overreacting. Perhaps this demonstrates the difference in how our families handle things. Clearly, without proper guidance Without proper guidance, Nathan's laugh was sharp, humorless. Let me tell you about proper guidance. My father showed up to every baseball game I ever played, even when it meant losing pay. He sat with me every night through high school checking math problems. He barely understood himself because he was determined I would have chances he never did. He sold his prized vintage truck to pay for my first semester of college, before my scholarship kicked in. Nathan's voice broke slightly, but he continued stronger now. You know what he said when I told him I was engaged? He said, be the kind of husband who makes her life better every day. Not richer, not more prestigious, better. That is the guidance that made me who I am. Madison slipped her hand into Nathan's, tears streaming down her face. I had no idea about the nameplate, Nathan. None. She turned to face her parents. How could you do something so cruel? Eleanor at least had the grace to look ashamed, but Walter's face had reddened with anger and embarrassment. You are making a mountain out of a molehill. This overly emotional display only proves my point about your father's influence. Nathan cut him off by removing his expensive tuxedo jacket and handing it to a nearby waiter. Then, to everyone's shock, he walked to the coat check and returned wearing a worn leather jacket. I immediately recognized the one I had given him on his 18th birthday, patched at the elbow and soft with age. Dad, Nathan said, looking directly at me, his voice clear enough for the entire room to hear, let's show them what real family loyalty looks like. He turned to the stunned guests. Thank you all for coming, but this reception is over. Anyone who respects both me and my father is welcome to join us at Joe's Diner on Maple Street. That is where the real celebration will happen. A collective gasp went up from the assembled guests. Madison looked from Nathan to her parents, conflict evident on her face. Madison, Walter said sharply, control your husband. This is embarrassing. She straightened her shoulders and slipped off her elaborate veil. No, Dad. What is embarrassing is how you have treated the father of the man I love. She turned to Nathan. Let me grab my change of clothes. I am coming with you. As Madison hurried off to collect her things, Nathan extended his hand to me. Ready to get out of here, Dad? With more pride than I had ever felt in my life, I stood and took my son's hand. Together we walked toward the exit heads, held high while behind us the elegant reception dissolved into chaos. The scene at Joe's Diner 30 minutes later was unlike any wedding reception I could have imagined, and all the better for it. The fluorescent lighting and vinyl booths were a far cry from the crystal chandeliers and silk tablecloths of Westbrook Manor, but the atmosphere was infused with genuine warmth and celebration. Joe himself, who had known us for years, scrambled to accommodate the unexpected influx of guests. Booker Nathan. What in the world, he exclaimed, as we walked in, Nathan and Madison still in their wedding attire, though Madison had changed into flat shoes and a cardigan over her dress. Impromptu wedding reception, Joe, Nathan explained with a grin. Got room for us. Joe surveyed the growing crowd. About half the wedding guests had actually followed us, including most of Nathan and Madison's friends and a surprising number of Madison's younger relatives. For you two, we will make it work. The diner's jukebox replaced the string quartet, coffee mugs stood in for champagne flutes, and Joe's famous chocolate pie was sliced up in lieu of the 5-tier wedding cake left behind. Someone passed a hat to collect cash to cover the unexpected party, with Nathan's college friends enthusiastically contributing. As plates of comfort food circulated, Joe himself came over to our table, wiping his hands on his apron. Never thought I would host a wedding reception, he chuckled. Though I should have expected something unusual from you two. This feels more like us anyway, Nathan said, his arm around Madison, who was laughing, as one of Nathan's programmer friends taught her how to make a spitball from a straw wrapper. Joe turned to the curious guests nearby. "You know these two have been coming here since Nathan was knee-high. After every Little League game, win or lose, Booker would bring him in for a chocolate shake." He ruffled Nathan's hair as if he were still that little boy. "I watched this kid grow up sitting right at that counter doing his homework while his dad had a cup of coffee after a long day of work." The stories continued, genuine, warm recollections from people who had actually been part of our lives. My foreman, Mike, who had followed us from the wedding, regaled the table with tales of how I had taped Nathan's drawings in the construction trailer and arranged my lunch breaks to coincide with school events whenever possible. Madison's cousins, initially awkward in the unfamiliar setting, gradually relaxed and began to genuinely enjoy themselves. "This is actually way more fun than those stuffy country club events. Uncle Walter always insists on," one confided to me over a plate of French fries. About an hour into our unconventional celebration, a hush fell over the diner as the door swung open. Walter and Eleanor stood in the entrance looking utterly out of place among the vinyl and chrome. Eleanor's carefully coiffed hair had come slightly undone, and Walter's expression wavered between anger and uncertainty. Madison tensed beside Nathan, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It is okay," he murmured. "Your choice." Walter stepped forward, clearing his throat uncomfortably. "Madison, this is ridiculous. You cannot possibly want to spend your wedding reception in a greasy spoon." Madison looked around at the happy faces, the genuine laughter, the relaxed joy that permeated the space. "Actually, Dad, I am having the best time. You are welcome to join us, but only if you can respect everyone here, especially Booker." Walter's jaw tightened, but Eleanor placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Walter," she said quietly, "look at them." For perhaps the first time, Walter really looked not just at the diner but at the people, at Nathan and Madison's intertwined hands and genuine smiles, at the easy camaraderie that flowed among the guests, at me sitting tall and proud beside my son. Something shifted in his expression. Not surrender exactly, but perhaps recognition. "We may have overstepped," he admitted stiffly. "Overstepped." Nathan's voice was calm but firm. "You deliberately humiliated the man who raised me, who sacrificed everything for me." Eleanor stepped forward, her carefully maintained facade cracking to reveal genuine remorse. "You are right. We were elitist and cruel, and there is no excuse for our behavior." She turned to me directly. "Booker, I am truly sorry for how we have treated you. Not just today, but from the moment we met. We judged you by shallow standards that have nothing to do with what makes a good father or a good man." Walter looked like he had bitten into something sour, but nodded jerkily. "I allow my preconceptions about education and status to cloud my judgment. The nameplate was inexcusable." It was not a particularly gracious apology, but it was an apology nonetheless. I thought about Carlos's words behind the kitchen, about showing what real class looks like. Holding on to bitterness would only poison the future, not just mine, but Nathan and Madison's as well. I stood and extended my hand to Walter. "We are family now, like it or not. For the kids' sake, I am willing to start fresh if you are." After a moment's hesitation, Walter took my hand. The handshake was brief but genuine. "There is plenty of pie left," I added, gesturing to an empty booth. Eleanor managed a small, genuine smile. "I cannot remember the last time I had diner pie." "You are in for a treat," Joe called from behind the counter. "Best in 3 counties." As they awkwardly settled into a booth, the celebration resumed, though with a new tentative bridge beginning to form between our worlds. Later, as Nathan and Madison prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Nathan pulled me aside for a final private moment. "I am sorry today got derailed, Dad." I shook my head firmly. "Nothing got derailed. This," I gestured to the joyful gathering around us, "is more perfect than anything I could have imagined. You stood up for what matters. I have never been prouder." He hugged me tightly. "I learned from the best." Over his shoulder, I caught Walter watching us, an unreadable expression on his face. Our eyes met briefly, and I nodded slightly. We had a long way to go, but for Nathan and Madison's sake, we would try. 4 weeks later, I hosted Sunday dinner at my modest home, the first time the Harringtons had visited. The initial awkwardness gradually gave way to cautious conversation as I grilled steaks in the backyard, and Eleanor surprised everyone by rolling up her sleeves to help with the salad. Nathan and Madison announced they had found a house halfway between my neighborhood and the Harringtons, a symbolic bridge between our worlds. Walter, to his credit, refrained from offering to buy them something more upscale. After dinner, Walter examined a cabinet I had built years ago, running his fingers along the joinery with grudging appreciation. "This is excellent craftsmanship," he admitted. "I have paid thousands for custom work. Not half this precise. I could teach you some basics," I offered. "It is not about education. It is about patience and respect for the materials." A month ago, he would have scoffed. Today, he nodded thoughtfully. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone on the back porch with Eleanor. "You know," she said quietly, "Walter and I thought we were giving Madison everything by providing material advantages. Watching you and Nathan, I realized we missed something essential along the way." "It is never too late," I replied. "Madison obviously turned out wonderful, despite any mistakes you think you made." She smiled, genuine warmth replacing her usual reserve. "I can see now why Nathan speaks of you with such admiration." Later that summer, I took Walter fishing for the first time in his life. His expensive loafers got muddy. He tangled his line hopelessly, and he complained incessantly about the mosquitoes. But when he finally caught a small bass, his face lit up with boyish excitement that made him look 20 years younger. Standing there by the lake that had witnessed so many precious moments between Nathan and me, I realized that true worth has nothing to do with nameplates, bank accounts, or academic degrees. It is measured by the lives we touch, the love we give, and the character we demonstrate in the face of both kindness and cruelty. I may be a low-educated man by some standards, but I raised a son who knows the difference between status and substance. No Ivy League degree could make me prouder than that. Have you ever stood up for someone you love when it was difficult? Or have you experienced judgment based on your education or job? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, your worth is never determined by others' opinions of you. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next video.